I'm Justin with Digital Tutors, an Autodesk authorized publisher. In this series of tutorials, we will go step by step through the process of building and texturing a child character in a cartoony style. Now, cartoony stylized characters are really prevalent in the world of TV and film CG, as well as in video games. And these types of characters are a lot of fun to build, but they do present their own set of challenges. In this course, we'll talk about creating work that matches our reference images. We'll use a variety of polygon methods as well as some merge techniques to build up our adolescent football star from the ground up. In addition, we'll talk about creating topology that will lend itself well to deformation during animation. And in the end, you'll have a finished cartoon character ready for rigging and animation. And you'll have the knowledge that you need to begin creating your own character designs. So let's go ahead and get started by talking about setting up our reference images. Let's begin our cartoon character by bringing in some reference images. So, especially when you're just starting out, it's often good to bring in some images to be able to model to, so that you, in your different viewports, have the ability to match your modeling up with an image that you've maybe drawn or some kind of artwork that you have. It also, in this case, is going to work well for us because it will enable us to get a very similar result. So the result that I get as I go through the training will be very similar to the result that you get because we're going to be working off of the same image. Okay? So in order to bring in reference images into our scene, and you can see I've hit the space bar and just gone to the 4-view look here. And I want to start by going into the front view. Okay, so the lower left. And we're going to go to View. Let's go to Image Plane. And let's go to Import Image. That'll bring up a open dialog. We're going to go navigate to our project files. In this case, we've got a My Project set. So once you've got that, you need to go just into your source images directory, which in this case defaulted to. And so we're going to grab the kid front image and go ahead and open that up. And you can see that image has been added. And if I move it out, you can see that that image is locked to the grid. Okay, let's do the same thing over here on the side. So we'll go to View, again, Image Plane and Import Image. This time we'll bring in the side view. Okay, now you can see also in our perspective view that both of these image planes are showing up. So now we need to size these appropriately and also move them out of the way a little bit. So I want to make this kid about 3 feet tall or so. So I'm actually going to go into View and go into Image Plane, and there's Image Plane Attributes. And we can click on that image plane, and that'll bring up some things that we can change about our image plane. Okay, we can change the position and the size here. You can see there's the file that we've brought in our attribute editor. So I'm going to go under width and height, and I'm going to change these to 90. So 90 centimeters. Let's do the same thing over here with the side view. So again, going into here, I'm not able to access this, so I'm going to go ahead and we'll access it another way. If you go into your outliner, you can see here that we can go ahead and access our camera, and then on the tab here for image plane, actually image plane shape, and go in and now access the image plane for that side view if you can't access it in another way. And let's go ahead and change these both to 90. Alright. Now I'm going to go ahead and check that just to make sure. I'll bring in a polygon primitive cube, and I'm going to set all these values to 90, which is about 3 feet. Create that. Looks good. Okay. Now I want to go ahead and move these image planes. So from the side view, I want to go ahead and open up that image plane once again. Okay, and let's go ahead and here, and I want to move this side view back, so going in this direction. So I'm going to go ahead and set this to maybe -20 in the X. So you see image center, X, Y, and Z. You can see now it's moved behind the grid. I'm going to move it back a little bit further. So -50. Looks about right. Okay, so just so it's off of the center here, let's do the same thing for the front view. So we'll go in and access our image plane attributes, and again, go ahead and grab that through here. And in this case, we want to go back in the Z direction. And so X, Y, and Z. And we're going to go negative. So we'll go -50 as well. So now we've moved that again back, and you can see it's behind the grid here and behind the grid here. Now what this reference image does for us is that as we're modeling here in our side and front views, we can change the geometry, modify the geometry so that it fits with what we're seeing in our image. Okay, and this will be a great aid for us as we model. I'm going to go ahead and take the cameras themselves and kind of move them back a little ways. Okay, now one more thing that I want to do is I actually want to move these both up. So I want his feet to be on the grid, and right now the grid is right along the center line. And so what we can do is go into our side, and grab that. Okay, and then we want to move the Y up. So let's go about maybe 40. It's like 38 is good. So you can see his feet now standing on the line here. And we'll do the same thing over on this side. So again, accessing our image plane, the front view in the Y, which is up and down. We'll set that to 38. And let's check it. Looks good. Okay. So now we've got our image planes set up from the front view and from the side view to be able to start our cartoon character, which you can see is this little boy. Okay, you can see he's got these oversized proportions and large hands and feet. It's going to be a fun character for us to create and give us a chance to talk about a lot of great modeling tools in Y, as well as some concepts that are specific to creating cartoon type characters. Okay, so we'll go ahead and start from this point, and in the next lesson we'll begin to block in the character's head. So before we do that, if you don't want to be able to see your image planes in your perspective view, you want to keep them in your side and front views obviously, but maybe you don't want to see it in here, there are a couple of things that you can do. You can go under Show in that particular viewport, and you can turn off cameras. That will turn off all of the image planes, and you can just toggle that back and forth. If you want to turn them off without turning off the camera threads, you can select the image plane using one of the methods that we talked about earlier, or you can just grab it here, hit Control-A to open the attribute editor, and at the very top there's an option for display. You can change this from in all views to looking through camera, and that will keep your image plane here in the front view, but it'll eliminate it from the perspective view if you want to do that. Okay, and again, you can also just turn off cameras. So the first thing that I want to do is go ahead and block in the head. It's kind of the focal point of our character. It's going to have a lot of work put into it, and so we want to drop that in, and we want to start with a piece of geometry. Now looking at this, the first inclination may be that you want to use a sphere. Okay, it is a round shape. That's sort of a logical thing to think, but the reason that I don't necessarily want to use a sphere is because of the topology. So that if we go ahead and let's just bring in a polygon sphere and just take a look at it, you can see the way the sphere is constructed is it has all these lines going from one pole on the top to another pole at the bottom where all of the edges meet. Okay, it's kind of how this sphere is created. In the case of our face, we don't necessarily want the topology to flow that way. We are going to be changing it, but having more of a cube sort of based topology is going to enable us to get a better look. And really, the head, even though it is rounded, it does have sort of a rectangular shape. It's not completely spherical. So in this case, my desire for having a good start on the topology kind of overrides my desire to get something that's already shaped that way. So in this case, I'm going to actually start with a cube. So let's bring in a cube, and I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that I reset the settings here. So it's set back to 1, and let's go ahead and create it. Now right now it is down at the origin. It's very, very small, so I'm going to go ahead and move it up into position, and again, using my reference images, this is going to come in handy, and we're going to be able to shape our cube. So we're going to go into the create node of the cube and change the width, height, and depth values. So let's go ahead and select all those, and I'm just going to middle mouse drag in the viewport to automatically scale those up. Okay, we can go back and move this in a position. We can change just one value at a time. So for instance, I can change the width, and I just want to match it up with kind of the rough scale of the head. So the height, take the height up a little bit, and you can move it from the position. It doesn't have to be exact, just get kind of a rough approximation at this point. Okay, so here is our rough cube shape. Now what we want to do is actually, we want to smooth this cube, and smoothing is going to do a couple of things that we need to happen before we start to shape this. Number one, it's going to add more resolution. So right now we don't really have any points to manipulate aside from the corners. So smoothing is going to add that. It's also going to smooth the shape. So the boy's head is obviously not really a square shape like this. It's more rounded. So the smoothing is going to round that off as well. Okay. So what we can do is go ahead and go to mesh. It's going to smooth, and I'm just going to reset those settings as well. And let's smooth it. Now you can see that it has sort of broken down those edges, added more lines. We can also go into the smooth node and we can change the divisions. So if we change that to 2 divisions, it's going to smooth that 2 times, and then we get kind of a nice rounded shape. Okay, but if you take a look at the topology, it's going to be much easier for us to manipulate than having something that has a pole on one end. We don't have to worry about that pole on either end. It's very clean. Okay, quads all around. Quads are going to be these 4-sided shapes. If you've gone through the introduction to modeling, you know that I like to use quads. I think it's a good idea. Probably want to stay away from n-gons with more than 4 sides, and then triangles. You can have triangles if you need those. Generally, I like to stay quads, but it's not a hard and fast rule. Okay, so what you can see, it's given us the lines, and it's also given us the shape. I'm going to go ahead and just scale this up just a little bit. Okay, and now we can start to do a little bit of shaping. Now one thing that I like to use in this case is to go into our move tool settings by just double clicking on that tool, and I'll sometimes turn on soft select. Okay, and what this will do is allow us to kind of really softly move these. So if I, for instance, go ahead and right click and I select on an edge, I can increase this fall off radius, and let's increase this a little bit more, maybe 10. So you can see now that we have a soft fall off. So I'm not just moving this single point, but now I'm moving a little bit more of the surface. Okay, you can get so far as to really be able to shape this. I'm going to set this maybe to something like 15 or so, and then we can come in, for instance, on the back and start to bring this in to match it up with the shape of the head. Remember that we do have the hair up here, so we may want to kind of flatten out that area. And let me undo that. I also, before I do that, I want to actually turn on reflection just so that I get the same movement on both sides if I happen to click something. So now you can see that as I move this, it's actually moving the other side as well. Okay, I can still move the top, but I just want to go through and just shape this a little bit. Okay, bring the front down a little. Okay, we'll go ahead and select the point on the front, sort of bring that in a little bit. Bring this down a little. Just going to bring that down a bit. Same thing here. Okay, Now at some point, we're still low enough resolution that we can turn off soft select, okay? And let's also turn off reflection. So we'll turn off soft select. And now we can come in, drag across here, and just move these points, okay? And start to clean this up. And I have to warn you that when you're starting to get into modeling characters, there is going to be a lot of pushing and pulling of points if you want it to look right, if you want to have a very specific result, okay? There are tools that make things faster and that can really speed up your workflow, but it is going to involve a lot of just grabbing a point and pushing it and pulling it around until it's in the right position. Okay, there's really nothing you can do to get around that working here in Maya and building up those models. But you can use things like soft select to make it a lot easier on you, and you'll eventually get the result that you want. Okay, so I encourage you to just keep it up. All right, so I'm just going to kind of grab some of these points and move them around. I just want to get kind of a rough shape built for the head and just kind of match it up here, really from the side view, mostly here at this point, kind of leaving things off that stick out. So just kind of getting the general shape created here, kind of ignoring the hair a little bit, so that's going to add some volume to the head. Okay, and then you can come in here from the side view, and if you want to come in and shape this, and you can see I've turned off reflection, so the work that I'm doing now is only happening on one side. And that's actually okay, because the next thing that I'm going to do is go ahead and eliminate the other half of this. So I'm just going to select, and I usually like to delete the left half. If you're more comfortable working on the left side, then you can delete the right half. It's up to you. But I usually work on one side. This just eliminates a lot of things that we have to worry about. So we know the head's going to be symmetrical, and this will allow us to just concentrate on the one side, and then when we get it to a point where we like it, we can mirror it over to the other side. Okay? So once you get the basic head shape built out, the next thing that we want to do is start to build the edge loops for the eyes and the different topology that we need to create. So let's go ahead and begin that process in the next lesson. In this lesson, we'll begin building in loops for the eyes. So when we talk about eye loops, we're talking about the actual topology. So if you take a look at this face, you can see that we have the actual eyes, and we're going to be animating these eyes opening and closing. And so typically what you'll want to do is you'll want to have the geometry flow out in a radial pattern from the actual eye so that it can animate appropriately. It sort of mimics the musculature, but it really makes sure that you can deform it properly. And the same thing sort of goes for the mouth. And so right now we have geometry that flows left to right and up and down, and it doesn't really work for what we want to do here for the eyes. So we want to start to modify this. Now once we've got the shape built here, I'm actually going to add more resolution. We don't have quite enough resolution here, so I'm actually going to smooth it one more time. Now we have a face that is very smooth, but with some areas of detail, and we've got the overall shape, so I think it's going to be okay for us to go ahead and smooth this at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and do a smooth. Now it looks like that there is a lot of resolution here, but really it's still manageable, okay? And we can use our soft select to kind of move things around smoothly, and we're really just going to be concentrating up here, okay? We'll kind of leave some of this other stuff untouched. Now, one of the reasons that you might, in some of your projects, you might not want to add as much resolution. It's really easy if you're trying to get a smooth surface. It's really easy to get dents and creases, and sometimes that's really difficult to get out. So you want to be careful when you're adding resolution. You want to try to get kind of the correct amount, get a good balance here. Okay, so what I want to do now is take a look at where these eyes fall. So the eye from the front view is kind of right about here. Okay, so I want to select sort of a group of faces that I think would work to begin our eye, and I think I think probably this area is going to be good. So the first thing that I want to do is define this as sort of the outer edge. And I'm going to go ahead and go to select our vertex. And I want to change the move tool to work along the surface. So I'm going to change the move axis to normal. What that will allow us to do is move these points along the surface. So I'm actually going to start to move these points up a little bit. And move this one out. And what I'm doing here is just creating a little bit more of a, well, a little bit more of a rounded shape. Okay. So something like that. And you can take a look at here. It is around the eye here. And so now to create that loop shape, all we'll do is we'll select those polygons in the outer portion. And now we're just going to go up to Edit Mesh, and let's do an extrude. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead, make sure I reset the settings. Okay, and I don't want to use a curve actually, so I'm going to go ahead and extrude that in. And now what I can do is click on one of the little scale squares. I'm just going to scale it in. And so you can see we're starting to get that loop that we talked about. Okay, we can do it again by hitting G. I just repeat that extrude and do it again. Okay. Now eventually you want to delete those points. You may not want to just yet, but I want to go ahead and start to shape this a little bit. And this inner ring here, I want to really start to define the sort of the shape of the eye. And one of the things that might help would be to be able to see both views at the same time. So I'm kind of looking back and forth between the perspective view when I'm moving it and the front view. Okay, and I'm sort of matching up the shape. The middle one is not that important. Okay, so we'll go ahead and just kind of match this up. It doesn't have to be exact, so don't worry about that as far as matching it up exactly. You just want to get it fairly close. So I'll come in here. This needs to come down a little bit and come over. And so you can see here is where our reference images really come in handy. Kind of move this over a little bit. You can see the whole eye needs to kind of come over to the left here. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and take these points and delete them. And then I just want to come in here and smooth out this geometry a little bit so you can see where it is kind of off. And so I'm just going to spend a little bit of time here manually smoothing this out. So that means just taking these points and kind of splitting the difference between them, creating a smoother transition here. So coming in here, doing the same thing. In here. And you want roughly the same topology or the same number of points on the top and bottom so that when you're animating this and closing the eyes and everything matches up. So I'm going to come in here and just kind of move this over again, just kind of cleaning things up a little bit. If you spend just a little bit of time here kind of making this nice and clean, that'll pay dividends in the future as you're working on other things. You don't have to go back and clean things up. You've already got it sort of cleaned up. Okay. So that gives you sort of a loop here for your eye, and it's sort of roughly matched up with the shape. Now, you can't really shape this until we get our eyeball in there, because that's really going to, the shape that we create here is really going to key off of the actual eyeball shape that it's kind of forming around. So it's not just a flat circle here on the surface as we've created here, but it actually goes in on the corners, comes out along the actual eyeball to conform to it. And so we really need the eyeball in there to be able to do that. All right. So again, just spend a little bit of time, but you can see I've just used some of those faces to create a loop around the eye. Okay. So the next thing we want to start to work on maybe is the topology for the mouth. Okay, another major part of the face. He has a really cartoony mouth that extends all the way to these eyes, which are really set far apart. And so we need to start to think about this topology as well as the topology coming up and around where the nose will be. Okay, so we'll go ahead and start to work on that in the next lesson. In this lesson, we'll begin building the loops and main structure for the mouth of the character. So the first thing that I want to do here is I want to actually move this up a little bit. You can see here from the side that the eye isn't quite in the right spot. It's angling too far back. And so what I want to do is go ahead and I'm just going to turn on soft select. And I'm just going to pull this forward in the Z. Okay, so right about there. Get that in a rough position. The front of the face is a little bit more flattened versus the really smooth sort of circular or spherical shape that we've got here. So we can come in and kind of flatten that out. If you want to take your fall off down a little bit, then that will allow you to kind of leave some of the other vertices alone as you move this. So now let's start to think about our the mouth here. So the mouth is going to be really, really wide, very cartoony, and so I want to think about the edges that I'm going to be using. I think that we want to come back here, we want to get something that's over far enough, okay, and I also want something that's far enough down where I've got some geometry up here on top. And so I'm going to think about using this one right here. And so what I want to do is actually kind of cut this apart. So there's a few ways that we can do this. The way I'm going to do it is just hold down Shift, right click, go to Split, and I'm just going to use the Split Polygon tool. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and click and drag on this edge all the way up till it hits that point, which is that point we looked at, and then I'm just going to create a new line underneath the first line. So come down here and draw it back to the center. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and delete those faces inside there. Now I'm going to take the points here and start to move these out. So just very roughly, again, we don't even have the topology built up yet, but I just want to kind of drag this out here to kind of get a better gauge of where I am here. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of put these out. And this one, all these need to come forward a little bit. And bring these forward. Okay, and then this is the corner, so I'm going to kind of move it up into the correct position here. So something right about there. Okay, and then if you want to, you can kind of start to bring these points in a little bit more. And just kind of smooth these out. The key thing that I want to talk about is the flow of the topology here. So the first thing that I want to do is create a little bit more geometry right in here. I'm going to do that by using Insert Edge Loop tool. Let's go ahead and reset it. And I'm just going to add a new edge loop kind of right in here, just about the width of the nose here. Now the key thing that we want to think about here, we want to have radial loops here in a way similar to what we had here. Although in this kind of mouth, it's not as important, or it's not going to be as obvious as if we had more of a realistic mouth where you'd see the loops. This is a very exaggerated mouth, let's say. Another thing that we want to make sure to get is we want to have an edge flowing from the top of the nose behind the nostril, and we want it to flow down across and right outside the corner of the mouth. We want to be able to, when the character smiles, get this line right in here. Okay, and so we want to make sure that we have that in there. And so our Split Polygon tool is going to help us do this. One of the ways we can do this is just to draw out one and then work on the rest of them from there. So we can come in here, come across here, and you can sort of use this as kind of a guide. Coming across here, I want to come underneath this particular loop And up here, thinking about this being the bottom of the nose, that'll sort of come across here. So you can just start to cut across the model. Okay, so we can start to continue this around if we want to. Okay, I want to avoid end guns, so you can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. Then we've got triangles here. So the key thing here will be building this in a way that maintains the sort of topology that we want. So we can maybe grab both of these, and if we wanted to kind of merge those together, we could try that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and change my move mode to normal, move axis, and kind of get this out of the way here. Okay, we can start to look at these. So this creates a triangle here. Well, I'm going to need more resolution down here, so I can go ahead and take this and continue it down here. Okay, and start to delete that edge. And I can do the same thing down here. So start to bring this across, and you can see here is a sort of triangle shape. So we can take this edge and we bring it down here. Okay. You actually see, you can see this point right here. I'm going to go ahead and add some geometry coming straight down here, and then delete that edge, and then we can go ahead and continue this edge. So we need at least 2 or 3 edges coming in to create that sort of a line. Now, as you see this line coming in here, I'm going to need extra resolution in here if we're going to have a smile. So I can come in here and either use this line or add a new one, but we can now go ahead and continue this. Instead of cutting it off there, we can go ahead and continue it up and over. Okay, kind of delete that there. At this point, we could come in, if we wanted to come in with this edge, and come in at the base of this triangle. So I can get the line here. And you can see here we have some quads, and it's starting to create that loop coming around the mouth. Okay, now we do probably need to add a little bit more resolution in here, but you kind of get the idea of what we're trying to do here. We're trying to get this geometry flowing down and around. Okay, so we can come in, and where this triangle is, we can go ahead and finish that off in the corner, which will give us another line there coming around. And then we can move that down to make room for cutting off this end gun right here. Over here. Okay, so we're just starting to get this sort of a look here. Okay, and you do want to continue this line coming around. Okay, and you can decide, you know, come in here and cut it off and come around. We are going to need resolution here for the edges of these lips, so that's okay to add that in. And you can see here that we now have a triangle here. We actually have a triangle right here. So we can go ahead and extend this down to this triangle to create our quad. Okay, and this one, you know, this is a pretty large area to have just a couple of divisions here. And so I think it would be good if we were to come in and add a new line here, and having that triangle there means we can add it and still create quad geometry. So I'm going to go ahead and add it all the way to the base of this triangle. So that means this will sort of flow in and around. The exact topology isn't as important as the fact that you've got things evenly spaced out. Probably want to add another line right in here. You can do that with the insert edge loop tool. Adding a new edge loop, and then you can start to shape it. But you can see where we're starting to get that line flowing down here, so we can get that crease where the smile is going to happen. And then we also want to have enough geometry in here to create the shapes that we want. You can see here where we've got, I've kind of left that off here, so we can go ahead, and if you wanted to bring that up and across here, for instance connecting this with this, you could do that. okay? We'll still be modifying this topology because we haven't actually made all of the features yet. So we haven't built the nose or anything like that yet. But the idea is just you want to build that mouth in and get the edges kind of flowing in the way that you want. So between lessons, I'm just going to clean things up just a little bit. Okay, I'm not going to do anything too drastic. I'm going to just come in here and just smooth out some of these edges between here, but I'm not going to change any topology. If there's any changes that we need to make, I'll go ahead and do that within one of the lessons, okay? So we'll come in the next lesson and have this kind of cleaned up a little bit with the same topology, and we'll talk about adding the nose geometry. So we'll go ahead and do that next. In this lesson, we'll begin to build the character's nose. So here's where we left off. So the nose on this character is kind of a little button nose. Yeah, there's not a lot of detail. His face is really pretty flat, relatively speaking. His mouth is going to extend. He's going to have kind of an overbite, but his nose, we really want to concentrate just on this area. He's not going to have a real pronounced bridge. It's going to kind of blend back into the head. So what we can do is come in here and start to figure out where exactly that nose is going to be. And so it looks like, right here is where we've sort of defined that nose as. And so let's go ahead and just extrude that out. And I want to go ahead and I want it to blend back in. So I'm going to actually go ahead and select these polygons all the way up here. So let's go ahead and do an extrude. And let's kind of pull this out a little bit. Okay, I'm just going to pull it out just a little, and then I'm going to take the bottom part here and pull that out even more. So we'll go ahead and pull this out. And remember, this is only half of the model. Go ahead and pull this out. And I want to take these, and I want to just angle them up just a little bit. Okay, so keeping our line coming up in here across the nose. And now we can start to blend this sort of back into the body. So I can take this and kind of bring it down. I'll take this one and kind of blend it over a little bit. Okay. Now remember, when you extrude something here along the interior seam, you're going to have these polygons on the inside. So I'm going to go ahead and select these, and let's delete those. Okay, so that when we mirror this over, it'll go over appropriately. And I want to thin this out a little bit, so as it blends back in, it also gets sort of thinner, a little bit thinner here. And I want to also give myself a little bit more detail in here. So you can see where we created this extrude. This point extends to this point. So if there's an area where we want to add extra resolution, we can do that by coming in and using split. So in this case, I'll access the split polygon tool. Again, it's shift, right click, split polygon tool. Come from this point, and I'm going to extend it down into the eye. Okay, this will give us some more control over the corner of the eye, which we'll need to shape a little bit. And then I'll delete this edge, and then this edge we can extend up across here and up into the head. Okay, now he's going to have hair, so I can go ahead and cut that off at the top of the head here. I'll now go in and kind of smooth this out a little bit using move along normals. Okay, and just kind of space things out a little bit so they're a little bit more even. And now we have that extra resolution, and it can blend back up into the head more seamlessly. Now, in order to get rid of that triangle and also give us more resolution to work with in here where we're trying to shape the nose, we can come in and actually create that using our insert edge group tool, and we'll just drop that in kind of right in the middle. You can see it's cut off right at the base there. Go ahead and kind of just move that forward a little bit, and now we have resolution in here that we can use to add a little bit more shape. Okay, so whenever you add resolution, you want to take a look at where that's going to be, what all that is going to affect as far as the position, what areas where that geometry is going to flow, and we can come in and start to shape this nose a little bit more. Okay, now we definitely want to have nostrils, okay? And so we can come in here and let's grab both of these polygons and we'll just do an extrude these down. And I want to just shape this so that it is not quite so large. Again, you can change your move axis if you want. Alright, something like that. And then you can take those and extrude them up. Okay? And there we've got our simple nose. Now once we get everything put together, we get the symmetry, the other side done, then we'll be able to shape this a little bit more. We're just now trying to build in the basic structure of it. Okay? And so we can clean this part up a little bit as we go up here. But in the next lesson, what we want to do is to actually create the actual eye geometry. So the eyeball itself, so that we can start to shape this area in here and match it up with what we've got. So until then, I'm just going to move some points around along the surface, clean this up a little bit, and then we'll come in the next lesson and create our actual eye. In this lesson, we'll create geometry for the eyeball. Now, it may seem a little strange at this point to begin building something like the eyeball. I mean, we haven't really done too much to the actual head, but the reason that I want to do that is so that I can put the eyeball in place, and then we can use it as a guide to shape and wrap the orbit around the eye and the eyelids and everything. We have a guide to be able to model to. Okay, so typically, the eye is going to be built in 3 pieces when we're doing a kind of a simple eye like this. I mean, you could do a simple sphere if you wanted to, but we're going to give it a little bit more detail. So I'm actually going to use a different type of geometry for this. We're going to use NURBS geometry. So let's go ahead and create a NURBS primitive sphere. And I'm just going to go ahead and reset everything, make sure everything's reset, and we'll go ahead and create that. Now that sphere is going to be located down here at the origin. We'll go ahead and build our eye down here as well. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to go ahead and rotate it so that the pole is facing the direction we want our eye to be facing, so in the positive Z. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate it, and let's just rotate it 90 degrees in the X direction here. Okay, so we've got the pole here. The next thing I want to do is I want to define sort of the outer area of the iris, and so we're doing kind of a cartoony eye, so I might make it a little bit bigger. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and select the isoparm. Okay, so right click, isoparm, and then I'm going to click on this isoparm here and drag it into where I want the outer edge of the iris to be. Okay, so the colored part, where the cornea, the lens is going to be. And so let's go ahead and say, well, I think that's probably pretty good right there. And then I also want to add 2 more next to it. So shift, and I'll drag out a couple more, and I'll just make those fairly close here. Okay, so we've got these 3 isoparms. We need to actually add them to the geometry, so we're going to go to the surfaces menu set, and let's go ahead and go to insert isoparms. So under edit NURBS, insert isoparms. That'll add those isoparms there. Okay, now what I want to do is duplicate this. So I'm going to call this eye outer. Let's hit Control D, and we'll call this something like eye main. Okay, and I'm going to actually go ahead and just scale this in slightly. So for the eye outer, what I want to do is right click and go to holes, and then I want to select the holes inside of these 3 isoparms that we created. Okay, and I also want to select the one in the center here. I'm going to go ahead and change to a world move axis. And for this eye outer, I want to actually move everything out a little bit, so create kind of a bulge. Coming out here, this is where the lens is going to be inside of here. And so I can come in here, I can even kind of scale this out a little bit to make more of a little bit more of a bulge. So this is going to be sort of the clear outer layer of the eye. You might want to soften that up just a little bit, and then we're done it there. Oops. Make sure you select the correct hole. Okay. And we're not going to really get into too many materials right now, but I do want to go ahead and just add a quick material. So I'm going to jump into the hyper shade. And let's go ahead and create just a Phong. We'll assign it to that outer geometry. Double click on this, and I'm just going to increase the transparency so that we can see through it. Okay, I'm not going to increase it all the way. Okay, so now you can see through it there. Okay, so let's go ahead and hide this. So I'm going to hit Control H to hide. Now remember, we've got a copy of this with the same isoparms, but we haven't moved anything out. So in this instance, I want to actually take the same isoparms. So I'll select this one, and this one. I should say the holes rather than isoparms. You can't actually move the isoparms themselves. And so now I want to, instead of pulling it out, I want to actually push it in. So I'm going to push it in like that. Okay. I can come in and select this one, push it in a little further, select the center, and push it in until you get sort of a cavity here. And I'm going to go ahead and push it in just a little bit further. Sort of the opposite of what we did with the outer part of the eye. Okay. Now I want to create the pupil. So I'm going to go ahead, right click, go to isoparms, and the size of the pupil, you can decide how big you want that. You probably don't want to make it too small. You have it a little bit larger, so I'm going to go ahead and maybe do something like that. Let's go ahead and we can insert an isoparm, okay? Or if you wanted to, you could just detach it straight away. So we can go in here to edit nerves, and we want to detach surfaces. We can go ahead and center the pivot on that pupil. I'm just going to push it back a little bit, and then I'm just going to scale it up a little. And again, just so that we can kind of see where all the pieces are, I'm going to create a new material. This time I'm going to create a surface shader that's black. By default it's black, and I'll assign it to that pupil. Okay, so we're left with something like that. So now if we go ahead and show last hidden, you can see that we have the inside of the eye. This will be the color proportion, and then we have the specular, and so on. So let's go into our outliner and set this up. So we've got the eye outer, the eye main, and then the pupil. So we can go ahead and call this pupil, and we can select all of these, group them together, and we can just call this eye. And you can see, since we've built it down here, the pivot is in the group them together, and we can just call this eye. And you can see, since we've built it down here, the pivot is in the right spot to rotate around. So what we can do now is take the actual eye and move it up into position, scale it appropriately. So I'll take the eye, move it up here, and now we can use our reference art to place this eye appropriately. So it needs to be obviously a bit bigger. So we'll go ahead and scale it up a bit and kind of put it into position here. And from the side as well, right in there. And then you can come into your perspective and say, okay, it actually needs to be a bit smaller. Needs to move up a little bit and maybe over a little. And you can sort of get it in the right spot. Now, once you start modeling and actually manipulating this, you can always change it. Okay, you don't have to be stuck with it. Okay, but now you can see, wow, that eye that we had is really off. It needs to wrap around this eye, and there's a lot of stuff that we can do to make this match up better with the shape of an eye. So that's what we're going to do in the next lesson. We're going to take the geometry that we've created around here and begin to shape it and match it up with this geometry that we've added as the eye. Okay, and still working on one side of the model. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that in the next lesson. Yeah, around the eye to fit the eyeball that we just created. So let's go ahead and begin to shape this. So we've decided that this interior line is going to be the edge of our lid. You don't have to do it that way. You could make this the area where the lid starts to come over the eye, but we've already got it kind of shaped and in position here from the front view, so let's assume that that's what we want to do here. So in that case, we can start to take the next line here, in this case the edge right up here, and I'm actually going to leave this on the world because we're going to be moving it in and out. And we want to start to define it, and you can kind of see this, but this is going to be kind of the starting point of our lid coming out. So we want to kind of push it back in to the head a little bit. Do the same thing over here. So kind of bring this in, kind of bring it over a little bit and back. If it penetrates in a little bit at this point, that's okay. Bringing in this one, we'll go ahead and kind of move this over. We can always add more geometry later. Right now we're just trying to match this up. So bringing this in, and one on this side here. Bring that in a little bit more. And I'm going to bring these out just a little bit. Okay. The ones down here, I'm going to go ahead and bring them up a bit and slightly in. Same thing here. Again, just looking back and forth between the different views to figure out where exactly we want these to be. Bring that in. And just make our way around until we get all the way back up to where we started. Okay, so I'll come in here, bring this in, do the same thing here. You can see we're still within this loop, the initial loop that we created, so everything's okay. We can still add more geometry within this loop, and it's really easy to do. Okay, now you can see here, as we're starting to get in here, there's a big sort of gap, and so I'll come in here, and this one, obviously you can tell it's going to need to go back into the head quite a bit, so we can start to push these back on the inside here. Okay, and then they'll gradually work their way out. Okay, now we can start to match up the edge of the lid. So we've got it sort of matched up here from the front view. Okay. Obviously it needs to come back. This whole thing needs to kind of come back a little bit. So we can go ahead and bring the whole thing back a bit. Start to bring this around the eye. And we'll bring this back. If it's not matching up exactly, that's okay. You can always manipulate the eye as well. Make it a little bit bigger is what it's starting to look like we need to do. Go ahead and again take this edge and we want to match it up from the front view. And then we want to push it back so it's right along the surface of the eye. Okay, we do the same thing here. Right along here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and scale this up just a little bit. Okay. And I'll move it just a bit. And move it back a little. Okay, and then we can continue to sort of tweak this a bit. So I'll take this edge and kind of move it in. Same thing here. Keep in mind that this model will be smooth. And so you can see we're getting a faceted look here, but that will go away when we actually smooth it out. Okay, so we want to create kind of an even look. Now, looking at this, you can tell right away that there's a lot more resolution on the bottom of the eye than we have on the top lid. And we don't necessarily want that to happen. We want it to be a little bit more even and a little bit more the same. Okay? And so we can start to add more resolution in here if we want to. So we can take another line and drop it right up in here. You'll notice when that happens, though, we go into our Insert Edge Loop tool and we add another line right in here. You'll notice that that actually continues up into the chin. We can deal with that later. We're going to have a neck in here. We could probably still do some geometry down here. So in this case, not as much of a big deal. You do want to be aware that whenever you add resolution, you want to know where all that resolution is going to go, how it's going to terminate, if it's going to go across the entire model. You want to be aware of all of that. So we can come in here now and sort of space this out a little bit. Okay, we've added new resolution, but it hasn't changed the shape, which can cause kind of creasing and a look that we don't necessarily want. Okay, so now you can see that we're starting to get that geometry added where we want. It's sort of wrapping around the eye. So now it just takes some careful placement. It's okay if it's a little bit off. In fact, we want it to be a little bit off so that we can add some thickness to it. Come in here and kind of smooth this out a little bit. Okay, bring both of these back in to create a nice smooth transition here. Push this one back in a little bit. Okay, let's bring this out a little. Leave a little bit of a gap there. And push it down and out in the Z area. Alright, so once we've got something like this, we can start to add the thickness of the eyelids. So we can come in here, double click. So I right clicked, selected edges, double clicked on the edges. Now let's do an extrude. And I'm just going to push these in with Z until it penetrates in with the eye here. Okay. So that creates the thickness. I can come in and kind of move that up a little bit, move some of those points out. Alright, so something like that. And now we can start to add a little bit more resolution. I want to add a little bit more in here, but first I want to kind of smooth this out a little bit. So you can see that this needs to be smoothed out. So I'm going to just push these back into the head a little bit more. I'm going to select this and kind of bring it out a little bit. Okay. And I want to actually add one more line in here. And you can see when I add that, it's isolated to this loop. Okay. Now, whenever we want to check and see what this looks like as a smooth model, all we have to do is hit 3 on our keyboard. And that's the smooth mesh preview. And I really use this a lot. You can just check to see what this is going to look like when I smooth it or subdivide it. Okay. Typically, I'll use this during modeling because it can go back and forth really quickly, or you can model with it on. So just going back and hitting 1, 2, you can see the smooth version and the cage. 3 will let you just see the smooth version, and you can quickly go back and forth. So this will allow you to see if these areas are too soft, for instance, on the edge of the lid. So what I can do now is go to Insert Edge Loop tool, and right on the outer edge of that lid, I can add a new edge loop, and what that does is tighten up that smoothing, so that now when we look at it, we get a much sharper edge here. Okay, now we have a really round edge at this point. So in order to tighten that up, I can select those points, making sure I don't have anything else selected, and I can start to move those together. And when you move those points closer together, that softened line sharpens up a little bit. So I can do that in the corners of the eyes. Okay, I might need to take this and move it down just a little bit. Okay, in areas like this, you want to kind of sharpen that up as well. And so you can come in and add an edge loop in there, and you can see how that starts to sharpen that area up. Okay, we're starting to get a good eye shape. Now we do need to come in here and start to space out some geometry. So for this, I would probably switch back and actually switch to normal move axis, and I would start to shape this. Again, doing some of that more tedious manual positioning of the vertices in order to create the shape that I want. So in this case, I want to have a little bit more space between these, so I can come in and space these out a little bit more and just tweak the overall position and shape. Keeping in mind that I do want to have a little bit more tightness in here, so I'd leave these a little bit closer together. Okay, just think of that when you smooth it. Points and edges that are further apart, you're going to have a smoother surface. Edges and points that are closer together, you're going to have creases and more sharp edges. Okay, so I think that that eye looks pretty good, and it's shaped pretty well to our eyeball. Okay, so if you want to get close to something like that, make sure to define the edge of the lid around the eyeball, have it sort of wrap around from the sides, and then also the area where the lid starts. So I'll go ahead and just clean this up a little bit by moving some of these points around. with the move tool. And in the next lesson, we will begin adding some shape to the mouth. So something similar that we did to the eye, we'll go ahead and do to the mouth. All right, so let's go ahead and do that in the next lesson. In this lesson, we'll begin to add some shape to the mouth of our character. So there's a couple of points that I want to make sure and talk about when we talk about the mouth. But before we do that, let's just go in and make sure that the profile of the mouth kind of matches up with the image that we have. So we can go into the side view, and if you want to start to smooth things out, you can. But I'm going to go ahead and it looks like the nose is a little bit off here in the side view, so that's part of the upper part of the mouth. So I'm going to go ahead and move that sort of into position here. Okay, so we can just get this upper part in the right spot, and then we can come in and start to dial this in a little bit more. You can see where he's got this sort of overbite, this almost like a Simpsons kind of an upper lip sticking out here. Okay, and so you can come in and start to modify that. We'll go ahead and bring in the bottom lip, and the bottom lip really, it transitions right into the chin. There's really not a lot of transition there, and so we can come in and kind of shape this a little bit more. And I want to have enough geometry in here to get a little bit of detail, so I'll kind of move this up in position here. Okay. Now, one of the important things that we want to think about when we're talking about the mouth is the corner here. This is something that is really easy to get wrong. So you can see right now that the corner of the mouth is sort of out along the body, and this is something that if you leave it, it can really give it away as being a CG or really not understanding how the mouth works. And so what you want to do is you want to take the corner of this mouth and you want to actually pull it in. Okay, and part of that is the top edge of the lip. We want to actually fold and go down and inside the mouth. So with the corner of this mouth selected, the very inside corner, I'm going to go ahead and push it in. I want to kind of push it back inside the head a little bit, maybe up a little. Okay, so something like that. We can go ahead and take this and roll it down and in a little bit more. Okay, so the idea is that this lip edge will kind of roll down and inside the mouth here, and the corner of the mouth itself is going to be pushed back as well. All right. Now we actually want the line, the smile line, to come along here as well, but I want to have just a little bit of flesh coming around and separating that. So right around the area where that lip goes in, I want to have this little bit sticking forward. Okay. And so I'm going to go ahead and pull this out. The bottom lip, we want to do the same thing. So we want it to roll back into the corner of the mouth. So we'll kind of push it back in here gradually. And then here's our little bit of flesh coming out right around the mouth. Okay, so this is the little bit sticking forward. So here is going to be the laugh line, or the smile line here, and it's going to be the inner part of it. So we can go ahead and take this, and we can smooth this out later, but for now I want to go ahead and push it in so we get a good idea of where that actually is. Okay, and so this is kind of defining the area right here that's going to be defining that line. When the character smiles or makes another kind of expression, that's what we're going to see. Okay, now we want another line coming in here that's actually going to define the flesh or the top of that. So what I want to do is space this out so that we have room to add another line in there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and use the normal move axis, and I want to take this line and just move it up a little bit. So I'm moving this up and over a little bit, just giving us a little bit more room to work here. Coming in here and moving that up. And so now what we can do is come in here with our insert edge loop tool and add a new edge loop right in here. And this one is going to be the flap of the smile line here. So I'll go ahead and bring this out. So it's working together with that point right next to it to create that sort of a crease. And again, I'm making it a little bit more drastic than it will end up being, because I want to just be able to see it and make sure that it's going in the right direction. Okay, as it starts to come here around the cheek, we'll start to blend it sort of back in to the surface of the face. As it comes down here, and sort of blend that back into the face here. And you can see here where we need to kind of space things out a little bit. Usually take some time between each lesson and do that, just to get in the habit of taking a look around the model, seeing after you've added some resolution, seeing what needs to be added, what needs to be smoothed out, what edges need to be pulled apart a little bit in order to create a more smooth transition here. Alright, and now we can work our way up here and start to smooth this out a little bit. In some areas you may have lines that are starting to get pretty close together, and then in some areas you may have lines that are further apart, which are for those more open spaces. So I'm going to go ahead and just continue to shape this, add a little bit of bulk up here on the cheek. Okay. I'll bring this in and space it out a little bit. Alright, I'm going to take this whole line here and I'm going to go to World and I'm going to use the Soft Select, and let's dial down the fall off. So I'm going to dial it down to, let's take it down to maybe 2 or 3. I think that's probably pretty good. And then I want to just pull this back in a little bit more. Let's try 3 and just pull it back a little bit more. Okay. I really want to have the corner of this mouth going back into the head rather than out kind of on the surface. And so it's just something that you want to be aware of when you're doing any sort of character. You want to make sure to get that corner of the mouth correct. Alright. At any time you can go ahead and smooth it, see what that looks like. You can see we've got a very drastic line here, but for our purposes right now, that's okay. Now for the lips themselves, now we want to start to grab this geometry. Okay. Now in this case, we don't want to actually select all of these, so you can manually select those, or you can deselect everything else after double clicking. And then you can go ahead and extrude, and you can begin to extrude the lip back. So this would be the sort of the thickness of the lip. So you can kind of take this back. And these lips are going to be really cartoony, so we're not going to get a lot of detail on these. I just want to have some of that thickness. Okay. Now as it comes back into the corner of the mouth, I'll go ahead and thin that up a little bit. Okay. Take this and kind of pull it back a little. And here we'll kind of pull this up a bit. So again, just before we extrude again, just making sure that this row is fine. Give it the correct thickness. We want to make that bottom lip a little thicker. Alright. And then we can come in here and just do a couple more extrudes on this. Now, we also are going to eventually want to do kind of an interior mouth bag, kind of where it closes off the mouth. But at this point, we'll go ahead and just start that process. So again, going in and extruding. Now this time, I want to kind of scale up. And we can space things out a little bit more. And so then at this point, you can start to make that interior of the mouth. You can select some of those points. Now that we've got the lip thickness, start to move them up. Because we're only working with half of the model, it's much easier to do at this point than if we've already mirrored that over. It's going to be a little bit more difficult to see inside of it when we're trying to make this mouth interior. Okay, kind of pull these in and down. On the other hand, it's easier to select the edges if you're working with it as a whole. Okay? Alright, now if this edge isn't quite as sharp as you might want it, okay, when you smooth everything out, you can always go in here with your Insert Edge Loop tool and add an edge loop along that line to try to get something that is a little bit more, a little bit sharper. You can also come in here and start to manipulate this. So if you wanted to come in and add one in here, you could do that. It would just take a little bit of manipulation if you wanted to stay quads on that corner, but you could definitely do that. Alright, so that's how we can start to manipulate the mouth geometry. And just what I want you to come away with is just the fact that you want to make sure to kind of pull that corner in, roll the edge of the lip back into the mouth, and make sure that that mouth corner itself gets pushed into the head a little bit more than just sitting on the surface. Okay, if you do it the one way and then try it the other way, you'll be able to see the difference right away. Okay, so I'm going to clean this up a little bit. In the next lesson, let's go ahead and add our character's ears. You can see that those are a big part of the silhouette of his head. So let's go ahead and look at that in the next lesson. Here, and I don't want to leave you hanging, so let's go ahead and take a look at actually doing that. So one of the things that I want to do is go ahead and draw a line out here from the corner of this mouth and extend it all the way out here. So right now you can see that the polygon isn't really conducive to what we're trying to do. So go ahead and go to Split Polygon tool and draw that right down to the corner. So what that allows us to do now is take the lines that were intersecting with that point and move those. And so what we can do is go ahead and take that edge here on the bottom and delete that, go back to our Split Polygon tool, and now we can get the really tight corner of our mouth by having multiple edges rather than just the one. So I'll go ahead and extend that all the way through. And then we want to do the same thing up here. So I'm going to go ahead and do the Split Polygon tool once again. Come down here, draw this out, and it's going to go all the way back up in here. And then I'll get rid of that edge. Okay, so you can see now I'll get rid of that edge. Okay, so you can see now we've got a much cleaner look here if we were to go in and move this around. If we go, let's grab this corner and move it out a little bit. And you can see that this works a lot better than what we had previously. Now, one of the things that we will have to do now is extend those edges, which is good because I'm trying to get more edges up here to sharpen up this lip. And this will actually be polished. Okay, so now that we've got that done, we can make a much cleaner look here, which is what we had before. So let's go ahead and insert a lip, and then one sort of in the middle, and then we can connect those up. So we fixed up a couple of different things here. We'll do this, and then we'll repeat that process up here. Okay, so we don't have that triangle. Repeat that process up here. Okay, so we don't have that triangle down here, and we don't have that polygon that was oddly positioned. Okay, where we're trying to bend the geometry, it's right in the middle of a polygon. Now, where we're trying to make a crease, there's actually an edge there. So that works, I think, a lot better than maybe what we had previously. So now if you go through the process and you and you've created a certain topology. Topology is kind of a tricky thing sometimes for everybody. If you go in and create some topology that doesn't end up working, the beauty of it is you can go in and modify that and change it to really get an optimum flow for whatever it is that you're trying to do. So whatever you do, you're not stuck with it. You can always go back where you find the flow that you like the best, and then whenever you go in and have to build a head or some other kind of model, whenever you go in and have to build a head or some other kind of model, you'll know, okay, this is the way that I usually like to do it. Okay. So now I can go in and just kind of space these out, but this will give us a much sharper look on the bottom of it for sure. And then you can go ahead and just smooth all of this out. All right. And I think I also want to add, you can see we've got a couple of poles here, right here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've got another pole down here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And poles are going to be normal on any sort of head that you're doing. You're going to have these 5-pointed poles. Normally you want to avoid poles with 6 and up, but you can't really avoid having poles at all. What I do want to do is probably come in and put another edge between the 2 poles. We know it's starting to get squeezed a little bit as far as the geometry. You can go ahead, that will allow me to kind of move these in a little bit more, create a little bit more of a smooth transition and not have this in a little bit more, create a little bit more of a smooth transition and not have this big expanse here with nothing in it. So I'm going to go ahead and insert an edge loop right here. Now you can see, because of the way that this is built, that actually turns the corner and goes back up and over the head. Okay? And so we can actually, if we want to keep that, we certainly can do that. But we can also redirect it. So we'll go ahead and select this edge and delete it. And we'll double click on this edge, and I'm going to go to Edit, Mesh, Delete Edge / Vertex, which will delete not only the edges but also the vertices that were involved in that. So it'll get rid of that. Now we're left with this little guy right in here. And so we need to figure out where we want to actually move it to. So the nose right now doesn't have really any geometry in here that we can use. And so I'll just use this here, and I can bring it across. Okay. And then I'll select these 2 points here. And let's go ahead and merge those together. So now we're left with these. And you see these long, thin polygons here. You can also come in and, if you want to, bring another edge right in here. So you can see, if you do that, you will need to kind of space things out a little bit more. But you just want to look for those areas. You can see here, we've got this area here where we've got this long, thin polygon. And so if you want to, you can come in and insert an edge loop here. Just look for those areas. Now you'll need to space these out once again, but it will give you a little bit more the ability to create a smooth deformation. So now at this point, I want to again spend another round of tweaking and moving. Okay. Another thing that you can do if you just want to smooth things out is to use Artisan. So we can go in here to Mesh, Sculpt Geometry tool, open up the options, and what we can do is select Smooth. So under Operation, you can see we have different kinds of operations: push, pull, and smooth. We can go ahead and hit Smooth. On our actual object, if we hit the B key, we can change the brush size. So I'm going to go ahead and increase that brush size a little bit. And you can see as I click and paint on the model, it's actually smoothing out those points. Okay, so rather than pushing and pulling points individually, you can come in here and start to just smooth it out like this. Now, if you want to have an exact position, you're still going to have to manually move those points, but this can be a good way to get an initial smooth or initial sort of relaxed look for your points. Okay, so coming in here, we can start to smooth this out. You can see how it's sort of spacing those out. In some areas, you will still have to go back in and manually move those points around, but this can give you a good starting point here. Okay, so remember that is the sculpt geometry tool. We can use it to just kind of smooth things out a little bit between our lessons. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just continue to kind of smooth that out a little bit in different ways. And in the next lesson, as I said, we'll go ahead and start on the ear of our character. So we'll do that next. In this lesson, we'll begin modeling our character's ears. So now we've got some of the main features of a face built. Let's go ahead and build the ears here. And so you can see that they are really these large ears that take up almost at least the bottom half of the head, really. And so what we can do is just figure out where exactly we want those ears to start. Do the same thing that we did for the eyes. So we need to figure out what polygons are going to be a good base to start from. Okay, so we've got a few here. We want to really just use how to figure out where the base of this is located and use those as kind of our guide here. So looking at this, it looks like this will be a good sort of base to start from. So the first thing I'll do is I'm going to just hit 1 to go to our non-smooth version. And I want to just shape this a little bit, much as we did with the eye geometry. So I'm going to go into normal and just create more of a rounded base for this ear to come off of. And you can tell that this is a cartoon character we're building just because of the size of the ear. So you've got really exaggerated proportions, which can make for an appealing character. Okay, so once we've got our polygons figured out, we can go ahead and extrude those out. I want to pull them straight out, and then I want to hit this little ring, and I want to rotate them back towards the body here. Okay, so as we start to come out, we want to angle it out a little bit more. Let's do the same thing here. So we'll go ahead and extrude this out again. And again, let's sort of angle this towards the body. Now I want to take the front part here and I want to just smooth it out a little. So I'm going to go ahead and take these points as this ear starts to come in towards the body and just smooth them out back into the surface here. So spacing these out a little bit and then also moving them back out along the normal. And then we can do the same thing here. Kind of move this back in a little bit so that on the front of the ear, it sort of blends it with the rest of the body versus coming off of the body as it does in the back. Okay, we can always add more resolution if we need to. Now for this edge, I'm going to go ahead and pull this up a little bit. If we want to, we can kind of pull this down. And so it's just kind of starting to define the beginning of the lobe. So kind of pull this in a little bit. Same thing down here. And in here. Kind of pull it up. Alright. And we'll take those same polygons once again. Get those selected here. And let's add the thickness to the lobe. So we'll kind of extrude this out. Let's go ahead and repeat that process. Extrude it back in. Okay. And then I want to go ahead and extrude again, and this time we'll kind of push it back into the surface here. Okay? And again, we want to start to smooth some of this out a little bit more. Okay? As we come in up here, kind of right here in the middle at the front, we really want to take that down and smooth it down a little bit. Okay? And even right up in here. We go from a transition from a really sharp division with the rest of the body to a very smooth transition. And again, some of that's going to be just moving points around. And not too many ways you can get around that. Okay? I also want to go ahead, and we're doing a simpler ear. Okay? You can see we're not making the entire structure of the ear, the helix and all that, but we are going to try to get sort of a stylized version of this ear. So we'll take this, let's go ahead and extrude it, and we'll extrude it in. Let's kind of move it over here a little bit, and kind of push it in a little. Do the same thing here, kind of push it in and down a little bit. Okay, we can go ahead and select this face right up in here and extrude that out. Scale it down a little bit. Let's take some of these points that we've sort of moved around and push these back into the surface of the ear a little bit more. Same thing here, give us a little bit of thickness here. And do a little bit more shaping on that. If you want to smooth it out, you can see what it's going to look like as you do smooth it. So I don't want the lobe to be quite that thin, so I would want to kind of take some of these points, move them down a little bit, and then maybe out. So same thing over here, it's pretty thin. I'll kind of move that in. And then want to add a little bit more shape to it. And so I'll just kind of take this and move it back. And we can do the same thing down here, just starting to grab some of these points and just creating a little bit more shape. Okay, so pulling this out a little bit more, same thing up here. Giving a little bit more of a kind of a thicker lobe at the bottom. Coming in here and sort of adding a little bit more shape to the ear from front view. Okay, this can kind of come in a little bit more towards the head. And again, this part can really start to integrate more into the head. Okay, we can do the same thing here. If you want to add a little bit more resolution in there, you can. I still need to smooth out this area a little bit more and probably move this up. So if you want to take advantage of the soft selection at this point, you can do that, or you can kind of just come in here and just shape this really, really quickly. Probably not going to be able to smooth it out using that soft select. So you want to come in and actually select those points, move them around, figure out how you want to actually transition that. And if you want to go back and move along normal to smooth it out, that's probably a good idea. Put out along the normal. So now at this point, what's left for me to do is really just some pushing and pulling of points. And like I said, if you want to define this a little bit more, you could come in and insert an edge loop inside here to help define that a little bit more. Oops. There. And you can see it kind of sharpens that up. And then what you would want to do is probably come in and use these points to help define sort of the middle, or the middle of the ear. So we could add a little bit in there and just kind of smooth that out a little. So it's not completely sharp. Okay? All right, so just do a little bit more moving of points, match it up with your artwork. You can see when you smooth it, it loses a little bit of volume. So you may want to go ahead and shape this. Be careful also of shaping exclusively in the smooth mesh preview, because sometimes when you push and pull points to get the curvature to look the way that you want, once you go back to hit number 1 to look at your mesh, it can be kind of messy. And so just be careful. I would go back and forth between smooth mesh preview and your basic look a little bit more often, instead of shaping it strictly in your smooth mesh preview, just so you get an understanding of how that's actually looking as a low-res cage, because you don't want it to be messy topology. Okay, so the next thing that we want to do is go ahead and come in and start to finish up the head. So I'll just tweak the shape of the ear and smooth things out a little bit, and then in the next lesson we will finish up the head. So go ahead and do that next. In this lesson, we'll finish up our character's head. So we've got it to this point, and the remaining pieces or details that I want to add to the head before we move on can be done on a mirrored version of this with both sides. And so in order to create the other side, the first thing I want to do is just make sure that all the points line up in the center. I can hit 1 on the keyboard, and then I'm going to go through, and you can see how some of these points have gotten off of the center line, and I want to go ahead and fix that. So I'm going to select all on the board, and then I'm going to go through, and you can see how some of these points have gotten off of the center line, and I want to go ahead and fix that. So I'm going to select all of these points that should be lined up on the center axis. You can see that there are a lot of them that aren't exactly lined up. So I'll just go ahead and select all of them, just to make sure. Okay. Next thing I want to do is go ahead into my Move Tool settings. I want to make sure that Retain Component Spacing is turned off. I'm going to choose a World Move Axis. Okay. And now what I want to do is go to the Move Tool, and I'm going to hold down X to snap it to our grid, and then I'm just going to pull this until it snaps. And you can see I missed one in here, so I'll just make sure that I select that one. So now all these center points should be snapped to that center line so that we can mirror this over to the other side. Next what I'll do is I'm just going to go ahead and delete the history on this, clean things up a little bit, and let's also go ahead and freeze our transformations. And now what we're going to do is go to Mesh, Mirror Geometry. Let's open up the options. We want to mirror this across the X direction, okay? And we want to do the negative X. As you can see by this, the axis here, this is positive X, so we want to go negative. So we'll go to the negative X, and we'll leave this as is. Go ahead and mirror this. Now one thing that you want to check is you want to go through any of these places where you have points that are really, really close. Go into your poly mirror, and you'll see an item for threshold. If I, for instance, set that up to 1, you can see that it's actually merging vertices that you don't want to be merged. So you want to make sure that this merge threshold is set low enough so that it's merging the points that are right on top of each other, but not the points that you don't want to be merged together. Okay? So now you can see that we have the single version of this. Now if we smooth this, you'll see that there may be some issues in the center where we've got this sort of a crease. And so what we can do is go in and smooth that out either with our Sculpt Geometry tool or doing it manually. Okay. We can also see that our nose may need to be tightened up, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go into Move, And let's turn on reflection. And with reflection turned on, I can go ahead and move these points and still get the advantage of working symmetrically, because the points that I'm moving are also being moved the same on the other side. So let's select these, move these in a little bit. Let's take these and move them in and back a bit. Same thing here. Okay. There are a lot of times when you're working on one half of the model, and what looks correct on the half, once you get it duplicated over and you see the full thing, either it's too wide or it's not wide enough, or you can just see that there are issues with it that you weren't really aware of at the time. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of pull these in, just generally give a little bit more shape to this nose. Okay. Again, you can see a line right up in here, and so what we can do is go ahead, and if I choose normal, you can see that that's not really working. So another thing that we can do would be to scale it. Now this will work if we turn off our reflection. So we would have to select both points and just scale those out, and that'll move them away from each other, kind of loosen it up a little bit. Okay, we can do the same thing here. Let's go up here and loosen these points up a little bit. Okay. And then we can also now use our move along normal, and you can kind of see, if you take a look at it from this direction, you can kind of see where these points are raised up. So you can see over here and over here, they're kind of raised up, and so we can sort of push those back down into the surface. Do the same thing here. Again, just looking at this contour, smoothing that down, and then the same thing here, and smooth that down. Okay, and that'll at least help. So you can see that looks a lot better. We just need to continue that up along the top a little bit. Okay, if we want to be able to see the other eye, we can simply select the eye, hit the up arrow, and so we're at the top level. I'm going to create another group temporarily, so Control G to group it, and then with that group selected, I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate. And then I'm just going to scale that eye -1 in the X to create the other eye. Okay? And then we can do some other shaping if we want to. One thing that I want to look at that we can do more easily now is creating, as I said, the inside of the mouth. Okay? Before we actually do that, let's create the neck though. So the neck, if you take a look at this, if I select some of our faces here, and then deselect some of those here. So what we're talking about is sort of this area right under here. We can get a kind of a better idea of where that is. Okay, so I think this will be a good spot to create our neck. Because we're not combining it with the chest or any of the arms or anything, it's just going to be, we're going to have shirts, a t-shirt and a jersey. The neck can have whatever number of lines around it that we want, so we can make it as high or low res as we want to. I think that this is probably a good option here, so let's go ahead and extrude this in. So I'll go ahead and just extrude it in a little bit, and then I'm going to take some of these points and just make more of kind of a rounded shape. Okay, I can do the same thing here. Now let's take these polygons that we have, and let's go ahead and extrude them straight down. So something like that. And we can scale them down a little bit. Alright, and let's do the same thing. So do another extrude, and we can pull those all the way down, scale them up just a little bit, and let's delete those polygons. Now at this point, it's still sort of square shaped, and so we can come in and start to modify this neck a bit. So obviously it's a little bit too thick and too long, so we can come in from the side and shape it the way that we want to. And again, if you want to turn off your smooth mesh preview, just so you're not shaping it in a way that is not going to work as far as when it's not smooth. We can cut corners back and in. Okay, same thing here. Sort of rounding everything off. Bring everything off. Push these back in. Okay, same thing here. Just sort of rounding that off. Okay. Now you could again work on one side if you wanted to. Okay. At any time, you can come in here. I'll just select a loop here, and you can see that this loop is actually going all the way. Let's do this one here. So what we can do is, you can see how the way that that's built, it's sort of going both directions. So if that happens, we can go ahead and just select it from the front view. Okay. Remember, it's still symmetrical, so we're not losing any detail by doing this, assuming that our modeling is still the same. We've only done it to one side here. And so now what we can do is really quickly just create more of a rounded shape for the neck. If we want to add more resolution in there, it's really easy to add a new edge loop. With that edge loop selected, you can go ahead and scale it. Create more of a smooth transition here. And then do our whatever kind of shaping that we want to do. If you ever have one edge that you want to turn into a couple of edges, you can go ahead and select that edge, and then all you have to do is go to Edit Mesh Bevel, and you can see it turned that edge into a couple. You can change the offset if you want to change that as well, and then we can also go in here and just insert another edge loop if you want. Okay? Again, when we're done with that, we can go ahead and mirror it again to the other side. So again, mirror, check your threshold just to make sure, but you can see the changes now that we made on the neck have been reflected in here. Now as far as the inside of the mouth goes, having this whole thing will allow us to just double click on this edge, extrude it, change to a world axis by clicking the little blue dot there, and start to pull it back. Now I'll start to make it a little bit narrower but still wider. Hit G to repeat. Still kind of inside the head here. Pull this back, okay, and we start to narrow it down a little bit, okay. If you want to move specific points at this point, you can come in here and select the one on either side to make it symmetrical and start to move those points. We can also start to scale the Z to kind of flatten it up a little bit. Repeat that extrude again, and now as we start to get back towards the neck, we can start to dial this down, squeeze it down a little bit more, even start to rotate it a little bit. Okay, repeat that until you sort of head towards the neck. Now you don't have to go all the way down the neck, but we just want a sort of enclosure so that when we look inside the mouth, we aren't just seeing open space. Okay, so we want it all sort of closed in. Okay, and you can see our lip is pretty, it looks pretty thin, so if you wanted to go in, you could kind of thicken up that lip, but I think that's a minor thing that we can take care of in those final stages. Okay, so just do a little bit more maybe smoothing and cleaning up, but I think it looks pretty good for starting with nothing. I think you've done a good job going through this process and getting to this point. I know it can be tedious to go through this, but hopefully you're getting used to it and be able to take this on, take your own character on doing the same thing. Okay, so great job. We're going to go ahead in the next lesson and start to build the base of the body. So the body is going to be probably a little bit simpler than the head. The head was a little bit more complicated. You have to think about the topology and different things that are unique to a head, even a cartoon head. So in the next lesson, we will start to build the base for the character's body.